Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am your host, Shana James, and I'm here today with Jonathan DePotter. Jonathan, welcome.
Shana, it's lovely to be here. Excited to have this conversation with you.
Me too. So we're going to talk about something that we've never gone into in the Man Alive history. We're going to talk about plant medicine and psychedelics and how they can support your growth, and Jonathan's journey of going, of finding plant medicines and of, the journey of growth, I would say, right? From self-focused living to actually being able to see beyond. And one of the things you and I talked about was, being able to see to future generations, to the impact that we're actually having. And so one of the things I talk about with Man Alive is legacy. And so being able to not only see, what of your life is happening for you, but how you're going to impact the world in the future. And so I'm really excited to dive into your story. And before we do, let me give you a quick bio and then we'll dive in. So Jonathan is passionate about raising awareness on the benefits of plant medicine like ayahuasca and psilocybin and its potential to improve well-being and raise consciousness, which led him to launch Behold Retreats this year, tailoring memorable plant medicine experiences in a safe, legal, and highly supported setting. Jonathan spent most of his career in client service, delivering strategy and transformation programs for clients, working with Accenture and managing the boutique consulting firm Capco. And Jonathan really felt that despite an objectively great life, right? Some of you may feel this. He had good friends, career success, that something intangible was missing. And so he took a sabbatical year to travel and ended up at his first ayahuasca plant medicine retreat. And in his expanded state of consciousness, he was shown directly the mindsets and behaviors that were keeping him from reaching his potential. And returning to the corporate world, he was surprised to find that he was much more patient, empathetic, and productive than ever before, and began in-depth research into the world of plant medicine and facilitating retreats. So one of the things I really appreciate is when someone who comes from a walk of life that's, very different than where they end up, right? That you started in the financial world and kind of a little more cutthroat, sometimes seen as really aggressive and demanding, and then ending up in this, it sounds like you had your mind blown, right? Ending up in this very new place.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's actually been a full circle journey. So I come from very alternative, very hippie parents.
Interesting.
And so early in life, I rejected all of that. Like,
of course,
I had no interest in yoga, no interest in meditation, purely rational, definitely set for the business world. So yeah, I mean, I found my way into the consulting world. I was working with Accenture for many years. Then, subsequently fortunate enough to lead a consulting firm in the financial services space.
Yeah.
for our country, for Thailand.
Wow.
But yeah, it was about 5 years ago that I was kind of managed to overcome my skepticism, which was not just in relation to things of a spiritual nature, but it was also in relation to quote unquote substances. Because
Uh,
having grown up in Hawaii, I was surrounded by a lot of substances, and I didn't see anything good that was
coming
coming
from
from.
them. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it was just all negative down energy. There
Yeah.
was all sorts of bad stories associated, and so
Yeah.
I had no interest in those myself. But a number of years later, I saw a friend come back from a retreat, and I saw the transformation that had happened in her,
Mm.
and that really kind of took hold
Yeah.
within
What did
the
you
back of
see
my mind.
in her that
Yeah,
shifted?
so she unfortunately had a really challenging childhood, and so she was always shy, full of self-doubt.
Yeah.
The world was always happening to her, as
Yeah.
I love what you said before, what's happening in the world for you, and I think
Yeah.
that's such an important message.
Yeah.
And so you know she went on a longer retreat, and when she came back, she was just so full of life, so full of energy. She was motivated to get our group of friends together and take us to the beach, get us out hiking. Uh, you know, um, we were doing rock climbing, picnics in the park, and it was just like, wow, who is this
Like big
person who?
change. Yeah.
Yeah, huge
Yeah.
change. She was so
And it sounds like
motivated.
you had a really wild experience that suddenly you said you were shown the mindsets and the behaviors that were keeping you from your success. Is that what it was? Can you say
Yeah,
more
yeah. So
about
that was
that? What happened?
yeah. So what I'll probably share is a little bit of a frame, and then you can take the conversation where you
Okay,
think your audience may be interested.
great.
There's kind of one of the ways that I look at this, being a consultant, is that there's experiences that you have in relation to yourself, there's experiences that you have in relation to others, and then there's experiences that you have in relationship to the natural world and the universe.
Yes, well said.
And then in relation to that, there's kind of healing experiences, there's growth experiences, and then there's kind of transcendental types of experiences. And
Mm,
usually there's a bit of a path that eventuates for people along this journey,
yeah.
in relation to these different kind of quadrants, if you might look at them, or
Yeah.
the nine that kind of sit within that. And so, yeah, I mean, initially the experiences are in relation to healing, to really, to understand yourself. These powerful plant medicines, they promote neurogenesis, right, which is creation of new neurons, which used to be thought impossible, and also the creation of new neuronal connections. And so what you see within the brain, if you put someone in an MRI machine while they're
Yeah.
on plant medicine, is what you can see is this massive information exchange and reconciliation between parts of the
Wow.
brain
That
that
had
normally
no
don't
that
exist.
hadn't been connected. Yeah.
Exactly. So, there's two dynamics that play into that. So the question is, why are our brains disconnected, right?
Yeah.
And the first is that it turns out that pretty much all of us have had traumatic experiences in childhood.
Yep.
In childhood,
Yeah.
even I grew up with super loving parents. They just took care of me so beautifully, and yet I had traumatic experiences that I
Yeah,
had
I mean
repressed.
the mini traumas too, are there like however, some small traumas of just being unseen or overlooked or valued for our accomplishments, all of those are in some way traumatic.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. The story I sometimes share is like, imagine a little girl who's walking in some groceries for mom. Mom's had a long day, and she drops the groceries. And in that moment, mom loses her patience. You never get anything right. Just get out of the way. And then the little girl, that's she
Takes
doesn't
that
have the
in.
ability. Yeah,
Yeah.
she takes that in. She's not able to, she doesn't know what to register in the subconscious versus what
Mhm,
to keep out.
mhm.
We don't have that capacity when we're young,
Yeah.
and so that takes hold. And the next day, the little girl's playing with friends at school, and she gets the ball, and in that moment she reminds herself, oh, you never get anything right, uh, just get out of the way. And she
Yes.
does, right? And then that sets this child on this completely different trajectory.
Yeah.
Just this minor
Yeah.
minor thing can have such a profound impact upon the direction. So that's number one. Number two is, honestly speaking, we're just massively overstimulated in our Western way of life. There's so much going on. There's so many decisions to make. There's so many bills to pay. There's just so much to organize.
Yes.
And as a result of that, we begin to make cognitive shortcuts. And it sounds like a positive adaptive response, but the reality is that those shortcuts become the highways of our brain, and we
Right.
come to use a very small subset of our neural pathways, and that's doing brain damage to the software, our
Wow.
own software.
Yeah.
Luckily it can be undone, but that's really, that's really where we find ourselves neurologically speaking, in the Western world today.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting. And in some ways, right, and at least how I learned psychologically, in some ways we have to take certain shortcuts, otherwise we would be completely overwhelmed. But at the same time, it's like, one of the shortcuts I often see people take, especially in long-term relationships, is thinking, oh, I know you. I know who you are. I know what you're going to say next. I know how you're going to deal with this situation. And we don't really, grow up or allow the people in our lives to evolve in a certain way. And then, people start to respond to us in the way that we see them. So, right, there are all these ways that those shortcuts can actually dull and dull our lives, dull our relationships, cut us off from other people.
Yeah.
It's painful.
Yeah. And you've touched on another topic which is so fundamental to working with plant medicine, which is, okay, let's say you go on a retreat, you come back home, turns out that everyone around you in your life still expect you to be the same person, but you're not.
Right. Yes.
And so
Yes.
there's this real requirement to, take that very seriously. And as you come back from such a profound experience, to integrate in ways that honor yourself and also honor others, and to really request that others around you honor, the changes that are likely to occur within you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if your friends want to take you out drinking on a Friday night, well, maybe not. Maybe this
Maybe you
is
don't want to anymore, right? Maybe that's
yeah,
shifted for
exactly.
you.
Maybe you don't want to, and for them not to pile up on you and come knocking on your door and say, no, you really need to come drinking. And it's like, no, I really don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, I know, my first ayahuasca experience, I don't even remember, it was probably 10 or 15 years ago.
Mhm.
It was very intense. And, one of the things that I really appreciate through the intensity, I remember, when I look back, I don't know how long I was laying there saying, help me, help me, help me, and it was beautiful. There were shamans over me, and there was, water and feathers and music. And it was, what I realized looking back is it was actually one of the first times that I had ever said, help me. Like it wasn't something that was in my vocabulary, it's
Yeah.
still hard for me to ask for help. And so, these experiences can be very intense and very profound. And I'm curious for you if you could share, a moment or a sense of like why have you continued to do this so much so that you created this retreat company, right? What's it about for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Thank you, Shana. Um, I think there's a few components to the answer. There's so many components to the answer.
Yeah.
Um, at its core is that as I progressed with my own work in this space, I
Mhm.
came to recognize that the first 8 or 10 retreats that I went on were actually being hosted and facilitated by people who had the right intentions,
Mhm.
but didn't actually know what they were doing.
Yeah.
So once I found my way to really high quality practitioners, it's interesting that you use the word helped, because as I started working with them, I also, I had tears streaming down my face, and I turned to them, this beautiful couple, and I said, oh my God, I've never felt so helped.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you, it's that's a difficult one for me, is
Yeah.
to ask for help, or to receive help.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, I've never ever felt so helped. And so,
Oh, it's beautiful.
before I really felt that I was making big progress along my own path, but the
Your own
reality
spiritual
that I
path, your own success path. What path are you referring to?
Right. The spiritual path. So
Yeah.
since from my first experience, I'd had a number, eight or 10 probably,
Mhm.
retreats subsequently,
Yeah.
before I recognized before I found my way to people who could really help me,
Uh-huh.
and then I recognized that, wow, the overwhelming majority of people who are doing this work are not having the major breakthroughs that are available, and the overwhelming majority of people who are doing, and the reason for that is the overwhelming majority of people who are doing this work, though they have the right intentions, are not doing this work in ways that it can be done. And
And
so
what
that
what
was,
would you say is the difference? Because again, we talked about this a little before. I
yeah,
imagine for you listening, right? You may have never tried psychedelics or plant medicine. You may be curious, you may, be about to try. And so one of the things I think that's the beauty of you being here, Jonathan, is that, you can speak to some of the dangers or the pitfalls of, who's guiding you and how the guiding is happening versus your experience. So since you got to have both, right, what was the difference?
Yeah, there's many differences. The first I would say is taking a more holistic and slow approach to the work. So weeks, if not months, of preparation
Yes.
Are the best. Absolutely. Once I started working with these healers privately, I'm a pretty action oriented sort of a person, and so
Yes,
they were slowing me down. And that's the right way to do this work, is to really take the time to ask yourself a lot of questions so that you really understand the shape of the inside of you. And so that allows you to set really meaningful intentions for a ceremony.
Yeah.
And that is profoundly important, because coming in with a very specific goal and purpose, whether it be, opening your heart, which is something that I would have laughed at a few years ago, but is the most profound experience that one can have, or one of the, anyway. So coming in with kind of very specific clarity on what you're going to work on in such a ceremony, in such a retreat, is super important. Now, the guidance around that is super nuanced, right? And so having high quality coaching and or therapy based upon the needs in relation to that's specific to you. That's number one. The second component is the healers themselves. Super important. It's an area that's generally under recognized in terms of its importance. And you hear of ayahuasca circles happening here and there and everywhere, where everyone just kind of takes the medicine and then whatever happens. Now, the people who are doing this work at a high level are doing energetic work upon you. Right. And again, 5 years ago, I would have laughed at anyone who suggested such a thing, right?
Energetic work is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You're like,
but it is. You and I both know it, having experienced it. It's powerful.
It's powerful. And when you start working with someone who knows what they're doing, you can feel the energies moving around in you. It's like, whoa, this is something very different. And there's our trauma and our fears and our the negative emotions are typically stored in the body, right, in a very real way. And so the healers who know what they're doing are able to bring the right energies to bring those up in a way, and at a speed that you're actually able to manage through, because those, often you're not able to manage by yourself. There's just too much happening. The overwhelm, the amount of neurological activity, the amount of physiological activity is too much, and your body can turn off. And it's very common that people actually do have a full blackout. And that's I've had that. That's terrifying as an experience. You think you're going to die. This work is absolutely the most beneficial that you can do, but everyone needs to be taking it as seriously as it should be, because you can be traumatized through these experiences.
Right. And I've known people who've had that experience, and friends of friends, and people who come out of these experiences, right, without the right kind of care and guidance. And it can be very traumatizing to be in a, suddenly your trauma has arisen if it's not completely worked through, or that, there is less identification with the parts that make you, and suddenly you can feel very groundless, or, just off in certain ways. So I do appreciate that you work with people who have a more consistent integration process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, ultimately through these, as you progress along this journey, one, it's about being able to provide people that guidance, right? If people have a profound experience, they might come out and say, well, this happened to me when I was younger, and I'm going to go confront my parents because they did something wrong when I was a kid. And it's like, hang on, this isn't really about that. That's not necessarily the right thing to do. Let's talk through this together. But if someone doesn't have that guidance, they're just going to go and confront their parents because they feel in their depths of their soul that's the right thing to do. And it's like, hang on, let's not move so quickly. This is your healing journey. Let's work on you. And then, as and when your parents begin to see big changes in you, well, then they might be curious about that, and they might, decide to go upon their own healing journey. So we're actually hosting
brilliant. Yes.
We're actually hosting a yoga influencer and her husband and her parents early next year. So very excited about that. And I think it's beautiful.
Someone who actually came and then their family, through seeing the change, signed up with them. Is that what you're saying?
Well, actually, no, we haven't done it with them before, but they're bringing the whole family, so they want to do it as a family experience, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I think this work is about bringing more beautiful energy into the world and doing so quickly.
Yeah. So okay, I'm kind of getting a sense. I'm getting a sense of the edges of this for you, but I don't feel like I don't have that sense of like, all right, in your heart, as you've gone through this journey. Right. Can you say a little bit about personally what's happened for you that has you want this for so many people?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the place to start is where I was. And I had, as you kind of said in your intro, I had a great life by objective measures.
Yeah.
I had, I was strategy director at Accenture. I had 3 or 4 different clients. They were bringing in $10-15 million every year. I had a team of about 150 people at the time. I was chasing the next promotion up to partner.
Yep.
And working with exciting companies, doing exciting stuff, digital transformation for Huawei, other major tech companies. It was exciting work, honestly speaking. But I had great friends. I had a great girlfriend. Life was good, but there was just this nagging something of like, something's missing. I don't know what it is. Something is missing. I can't just persist on this.
Put a finger on it. But
yeah,
you felt it.
I felt it. And so I took a year off, and so I guess if I compare myself to who I was before and who I am now, it's incomparable in terms of how I feel and how I am. It's just
So give us the picture, like what you were like before versus now.
Yeah, so I was impatient. I was living in Hong Kong, right? It's a super fast-paced city. Like if you think New York is fast, like Hong Kong is just it's so much faster. So I was impatient. There was a tight relationship between how my work was going and how I was going.
Yeah.
The two were absolutely attached at the hip.
Yeah.
I was drinking quite a bit. Hong Kong is pretty alcohol-centric life. And I was working hard. Like I was working really hard. I was up at 7, usually home by 10, 11.
Wow.
Doing it 5. Yeah. Often we're working on Saturdays as well. Big fixed price transformation programs, right? No messing around. So yeah, it was, and I would say that I wasn't quite self-aware, in the way that I would have described myself as self-aware, but I wasn't. So yeah, the amount of empathy that I've been able to build for myself, the amount of empathy that I've been able to build for others and wherever they are in their journey, and also courage in terms, and those are two kind of fundamental leadership skills, the courage to look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with yourself? What do you want to do with your life? The courage to think very deeply upon that. The courage to realign my work with who I am. So my journey when I went back to the corporate world was kind of decoupling my work from my identity, in terms of, I don't want my emotional state to be tied to how my work is going.
Right.
But now, as I've launched Behold Retreats, it's been this total reintegration of the two, because I'm cool, I'm calm, I'm collected, very excited about the work we're doing. And as a result of that, being able to reintegrate and think of work as play and as life purpose and focus upon our ability to contribute to future generations. This isn't about me. This isn't about, generating millions of dollars in profit. This is about how do we make this world a better place for future generations. So the motivations are just
Yeah,
so
very
fundamentally
different, fundamentally different.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love seeing you smile as you say that. For those listening, they can't see you, but right, it's like a glowing smile that I can feel, how important this is to you, how touched you are by this, as opposed to, right, what's the next deal I can close? How much money can I make? It's like, how can I really, yeah, heal the world and the people and create a better world?
Totally. No longer working as this politician within this huge organization, trying to, all right, who do I need to get to next to demonstrate my value so that I can try and climb the next rung in the ladder. It's like, no, that's
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
not what this is about. This is about trying to bring more beautiful energy into the world. And, and in saying that, again, the, the, the reality is that we need to up our game collectively in terms of how this plant medicine work is done. And so that's at the core of my motivation. It's like, how do we get more people, not just not just in terms of attracting more customers to Behold retreats, but also how do we're in the midst of trying to figure out, okay, so how do we actually systematize what we know? And when I say we, because there's a much broader collective
Yeah.
around me.
Yeah.
Systematize what we know so that we can make that more available to other healers, so that they're also lifting their
Right. So
game.
that they actually can do the deeper work and help people integrate. And, I love
Totally.
one of the words that you used before, ceremony, which is familiar to me, but perhaps not to listeners, some of the listeners. Um, I, there's these two different levels, right? There's one, like, how can a person shift their relationship with plant medicine to have it be much more intentional and ceremonial and, oh, I'm doing this for healing or growth or transcendence, as opposed to just to have a good time or just to, to blow off some steam. Right.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about um, the broader view of how people in general, or how, now it's being legalized, like psilocybin's being legalized. There's different, experiments with MDMA. And so, right, how to actually help the culture of the practitioners and the healers to do it in a way that benefits people.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is that, there are people who have done this work for years and for decades and still haven't
Decades.
had
Yeah.
major breakthroughs.
Mm.
They've still quote unquote missed it. So
Like
it's
worked with the
possible.
plant medicines and missed. Yeah.
Yeah, and missed the ability to elevate themselves.
Mm.
And so what we're actually aiming for is growth in the levels of consciousness. So I'd encourage anyone who's interested in elevating consciousness, I'd encourage them to look at the work by Dr. David Hawkins.
Yeah.
There's a book, very powerful book called Letting Go.
Mhm.
And so, you meet people who say, oh, I've done 100 ceremonies, I've done 200 ceremonies. And they're, you look at the life they've created for themselves, and they've got, bad relationships. They've got all this mess around them. And you're going, okay,
Yeah. Well,
what's
what
going
happened there? Right. What? Yeah.
on?
So,
Exactly.
yeah. So as you look at the work around consciousness and different levels of consciousness, how has that informed your work or the work
Yeah.
of the people, the healers that you're working with?
Yeah, so Dr. David Hawkins has defined these different levels of consciousness, and they're actually, it's a scale from kind of 0, which is the lowest emotions. Shame and guilt and fear are all down there
Yeah.
at the bottom, and then at the top you've got full enlightenment up at 1,000, and it's a logarithmic scale. So as I began working with people who really knew what they're doing, they're actually able to calibrate your consciousness, and you can. And so my experience has been exactly mirrored in Dr. David Hawkins' work, because I started at a level called pride, which is what you'd expect from someone in the
Yeah.
corporate world. Focused upon me, and also me,
And also,
and career
yeah.
success and all that nonsense. And then as I've progressed, it's like reading this book was just like, wow, this is an exact capture of my experience as I've been moving through these stages now.
Wow.
And then as you begin to move quite high up, then very interesting things begin to happen, because experiences can come where you are removed of 100% of worldly motivations, like
Yes.
gone. Like, you're no longer interested in running a business, you're no longer interested in going down the road for breakfast, you're just like, everything, you're completely at peace with everything the way it is, and you're just like, okay, wow, this is going to become problematic for my
Yes.
business.
Yes.
Gotta come back down a little
Well,
bit
right. And
here.
there is, I think that's, some people who don't have someone to walk them through some of these spiritual experiences where you lose track of your body or your ego or your identity or your motivations, right? To not have someone to walk you through that and be like, okay, here's the phase you are in, and here's how here's how we navigate this, and here's how you can stay, if you want to stay in this world, right? In the worldly world as well. Here's how we
Yeah,
walk you through this. And yeah, otherwise it's very
absolutely.
disorienting.
Yeah, and you need that expert guidance, right? Because you're shifting the ground from underneath you, right? I mean,
Yes.
you say,
Or
okay,
from
so
within you. Yeah.
yeah, my motivation to promote myself, my business is now coming from a very different place. So how do I make sense of that? And
Yeah.
so as people have these profound experiences and elevate their consciousness to be able to ask lots of questions, so that they're able to make sense of it for themselves, their businesses, for the people around them, and really maximize the benefits. Like,
Yeah.
that's really what this work is about. And I think the other message that I think is important is, as we improve ourselves, people around us notice.
Yeah.
And then they take a deeper interest in improving themselves. And
Themselves.
that's the ticket to our
Yes.
collective trajectory, is like,
Yeah.
just improve yourself, just improve yourself, just improve yourself. Other people will notice, they will ask you what you've done to improve yourself, and then
Yeah.
they'll go on their own journey. And so that's
Yeah, it's
that's
like a ripple, right? Like you're the stone that gets dropped into the water, and actually people are impacted.
that's it.
Oh, well,
That's
thank you so much for this and for going on the journey and being willing to, let go of who you thought you were and become someone who is, in service of the good and the future generations. I feel grateful for that.
I'm super grateful to you, and I'm super grateful for the work that you're doing with Man Alive. I think it's a beautiful message. So
Mm,
keep up your great work, Shana.
thank you. Anything you want to leave men with who are listening, and how can they find you?
Hmm, what would I say? I would say, find ask yourself the question whether you think you could benefit from listening to the universal wisdom that's available through plant medicine. This isn't work that's for everyone. It's very powerful. It's a very
Yeah.
personal decision to make. But if the answer is yes, take it very seriously. You might be inclined because you have a friend or a couple friends that know a guy. Do your own research. Really take the time to understand this
Yeah.
for yourself, and make your own decisions. Um, take your time. Take your time. Take your time.
I like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shana.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.